Hi, welcome back to my office. I wanted to get a quick video out to you before our meeting on Saturday to continue your thinking about an issue I raised last time about beauty being in the eye of the beholder. Part of the question is, are there, admittedly we all disagree, we have different opinions about what's beautiful. The question is, are there standards of beauty beyond us, beyond individual preferences, by which we can decide that something really is beautiful whether everybody appreciates it or not? In fact, maybe one of the goals of education would be to help somebody develop an appreciation of something because it is beautiful. They may not naturally recognize and appreciate it, but they can learn to appreciate it. Are there some things that deserve our appreciation, whether we naturally have that appreciation? Now, a similar kind of question, both these are values questions. That one has to do with aesthetics, but it has to do with ethics and morality. People disagree about morals too, right? They disagree about what's right and wrong. Some people think that homosexuality is wrong. Some people think it's not. Some people think that abortion is wrong. Some people think it's not. When I was growing up, some people thought for men to grow long hair was wrong. Other people thought it was okay, or women to wear short skirts and so forth. And we disagree about those things. Does that mean it's just a matter of opinion? And anybody's opinion is as good as anybody else's? Or are there principles of morality or ethics that are not just matters of opinion, that there are rights and wrongs in the universe, and we may not recognize them, but that means there's something wrong with us. So if we disagree, at least one of us is wrong. So we got this idea. The question is, are there moral principles out there that are not man-made, not made by human beings, but that are somehow inherent in reality? We often, when we talk about this, we use language like absolutism and relativism, and those maybe are not the very best terms to use, but basically the idea of absolutism is that there are moral principles inherent in reality that are not made up by humans, and they don't change. There are no exceptions. There are no places where, well, it's wrong for you, but it's okay for me. That kind of language is relativistic. Relativism is the theory that there are no absolutes, that everything is ultimately a matter of tradition and culture and human choices, and everything is subject to change. It implies that there is no standard beyond human beings by which our goodness and badness, rightness and wrongness can be weighed. Absolutism says there are some such standards. Now notice, it's a matter of some or none. Absolutists don't say that all moral standards are absolutes, only that there are some. Relativists say there are none. If I believe that 99.9% of all values are relative, I'm not a relativist, I'm an absolutist. Absolutist, you got to believe in one to be an absolutist. But there is this question, put it in the language we've been using, is morality in the eye of the beholder? Is beauty in the eye of the beholder? Is morality in the eye of the beholder? Or are there standards of goodness, badness that are beyond us? Now, how we answer that has a very profound impact on how we approach the task of education. And so I'd like for you to be thinking before our next meeting about whether or not you believe there are moral principles that are not human-made, that we all have an obligation to live by. Now, if you say there are, then you might also give some thought to the question of what are they and how do we know them? How would you demonstrate to somebody who didn't know them that they really are absolute? Now, when you first think about it, there may be some that jump to mind. Many of us in the Judeo-Christian tradition will immediately think of the Ten Commandments as absolutes. You might want to rethink that, though, because, for example, one of the Ten Commandments is thou shalt not kill. Well, later on in that very same book of the Old Testament, it advocates capital punishment. It suggests that, there are times when it's okay to kill. Also, soldiers kill, and sometimes we kill in self-defense. So, thou shalt not kill is probably not an absolute. At least most of us would think it's not, because we think of exceptions. It doesn't apply to all places, all people, at all times. What about, let's see, Well, in the Ten Commandments, that's interesting. There's one that says, don't make images. Now, that's kind of an interesting thing. If you were to study the history of art, you would study ancient Babylonian art, and you would study ancient Egyptian art and ancient Greek art, but you wouldn't study ancient Hebrew art. And the reason is because the Hebrews had one of their Ten Commandments, a law that says don't make images. Now, as a photographer and as a painter, I'm really bothered by that one. I hope that's not absolute. I hope that that was a relative idea that was particularly relevant to their culture at a given moment in time. But if one takes those seriously, it might be interesting to ask what is inherently wrong with making images. And when you read Neil Postman's book, you may begin to think that the writers of the Old Testament were onto something when they said don't make images. But anyway, so if you believe they're absolutes, you might give some thought to what they are and then how you would convince another person who didn't recognize those absolutes that something is absolute. Also, of course, think about what that implies for education. If there are absolutes, what should we do in school? And if, for that matter, if they're not absolutes, what can and should we do in school? So give it some thought. We'll see you soon. Thanks.